All right. Thanks for joining, guys. GM. No major updates today, so I'm just gonna go straight into the questions. We have one from the Honey Badger. It says, "How is the team feeling about the recent performance in terms of volume and fees? Are we losing some volume to new competitors like Phoenix, or is it seasonal slash low volume? Total volume for Solana is comparable to April, 628 million versus 662 million for August. And Lifinity's fees were 62.2k versus 51.7k. So using that as a comparison, it has been a poor month. Orca has done very well. Are there any other factors, or is it just some variance on the performance in a low volume month?" Yeah, so there's a lot of factors at play here. Hopefully I can not forget to mention all of them. So one is that the comparison you make is monthly volume, but one thing to keep in mind is our revenue calculations go from the 22nd of any given month to the 21st of the next month. And so it's not going to be directly comparable with monthly volumes that you'll see on uh, whatever dashboards, whether that's like Jupiter or like SoulScan or whatever. So um, yeah, those aren't a perfect overlap, so there's definitely going to be a difference there. That's one thing. Um, but yeah, going more big picture. Let's see. So are we losing any volume to competitors? So that is a possibility. If we are, it's probably to Phoenix because Phoenix has recently opened up their platform. They used to be closed, so they had like opened to specific market makers, I guess. Not that I like know about these deals or anything, but they had like very decent volume even before they became open. So they probably partnered with some major and professional market makers, I would assume. So the question would be like, what kind of change can we expect when they open their platform up to the public? And if I had to guess, it wouldn't really change that much. So there would be some new market makers, but especially for the major pairs, which is the ones we care about most, namely Sol USDC and all the related token pairs. I think by opening it up to the public, those markets on Phoenix wouldn't be that different because there would already be the major market makers making markets for those markets. And they would be professionals, so they would probably be quoting pretty tight already. Um, and those are players that we've been competing against for months now because um, Phoenix has been live in a closed fashion for a few months or so. I don't remember exactly, and they've been integrated with Jupiter. And yeah, just by looking at the volumes they've had there, again, like pretty sizable even from the start. So all that to say, like I think probably not much has changed. Maybe a little bit has changed from Phoenix opening up its platform. I mean, their volume definitely increases, but again, it's probably like less so for the major pairs like Sol USDC, and more so for more minor pairs that professional market makers wouldn't be market making for. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if a ton is maybe an overstatement. I wouldn't be surprised if there were a bunch of market makers on OpenBook who were making markets for some uh, smaller pairs who then moved to Phoenix because they knew that Phoenix had better infrastructure for market making. So then you would see Phoenix's volume go up because of that, for example. Yeah, so that's my thought on like Phoenix, and I think that's the really the only other like main competitor to us. I mean, Orca is like sort of a competitor, but it's not like their liquidity profile has changed all that much. So yeah, in terms of competition, that's basically it. Um, oh yeah, and I should mention like the reason that this question is being asked is presumably because our revenue this month was pretty low, especially compared to last month. Um, Almost a decrease of 50%, not quite, but um, maybe down 40% or something. Yeah, so I think that's why they're asking. And I think the main reason for that is just the volume, like Solana wide volume is down. Um, oh, yeah, and I should also mention regarding the volume comparison between April and August. Another thing to keep in mind when doing these like big picture comparisons is that for us, the vast majority of our liquidity and our fees comes from Sol USDC pairs. And so you have to ask like what percent of the total volume was came from Sol that month. And that will significantly affect like our total volume for that month. So even if 2 months have the same total monthly volume, one could have much more Sol volume. That same volume could be composed of a much greater percentage of Sol volume. And in that case, we'd have more volume. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Let's see. Yeah, and then one more thing is like, as we've mentioned before, like we're still trying out new strategies. And that, of course, entails the risk of our strategy doing worse than the previous strategy we were doing. And that'd be unfortunate, but it's still definitely worth it, of course. Like that's a risk you can't avoid. And the reason it's definitely worth it is that, we only have to try it for like say 1 month to figure out whether it's a good strategy or not. If it's not a good strategy, then we just never do it again. And yeah, we performed slightly less good this month, but it's not like detrimental to us in any way. Whereas if we try a new strategy and it turns out to be a good strategy, well, then we get to keep using that. And so the benefit we see from it is going to accrue to us not just this month, but for every subsequent month as well. And so we're still trying out new strategies, particularly for Sol related pools and how we use our Oracle. So and like Sol based pools make up more than 90% of our volume. So it's it really makes a ton of sense for us to optimize for that. So yeah, that's like also a possibility where like we tried a strategy and it didn't go well, so that can also result in less revenue for a month. Let's see, is there anything else? Let me read over your question again. How is the team feeling about recent performance, volume, and fees? Yeah, I guess fees is also something we change. Sometimes we need to lower fees because that maximizes our edge. And still, that can at the same time mean that we get less revenue in total. It's just that we have to lower fees because our competition lowered fees, so we have to like match it basically. Um, yeah, so that's another thing to consider. Let's see. Yeah, and when you say Orca has done well, like that's I guess two things to keep in mind. One is that Orca doesn't have fees turned on, protocol fees. So they are earning 0 this whole time. And, that obviously helps them get more volume because if the protocol isn't taking a fee, that means that LPs get more fees. And so people are more willing to deposit liquidity, which means they have deeper liquidity, which means they get more volume. But the protocol itself is not profitable at all. Let's see, what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, the other thing is Orca obviously works very differently from us. So like they have tons of token pairs, and so they will benefit much less than us from SOL increasing in volume, whereas they'll benefit much more than us from basically every other token increasing in volume. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's about it. Um, Hope that answers your question. All right, I'm gonna go to the next questions. We have Rawrman. Nice to meet you. I think I don't think I've seen you here before, so welcome. Awesome to see you guys participating in the Helium ecosystem. Do you have a liquidity target range for the HNT pools? Where did the initial tokens to seed the POL come from? All right. I guess you joined because we started market making for HNT. I'm not sure. Anyways, welcome. Let's see. Do we have a liquidity target range? Do you mean like the ideal amount of liquidity that we'd like to have for HNT pools? If so, sort of, but it's not like, so one thing, it's not a fixed number per se, because it depends on the total available HNT liquidity in the whole ecosystem on Solana as a whole. Usually we'll try to match that in a sense. Or I mean, it's a huge factor that we take into consideration when thinking about how much liquidity do we want, or like how much liquidity is optimal. So it's a moving target. That's one thing. I guess the other thing I'll mention is that right now the liquidity we have for our HNT pools is probably too low. We started with low amounts because we wanted to test the pools, and we are likely going to increase the amount of liquidity in the future. But yeah, to be determined. We'll see. And where did the initial tokens to seed the POL come from? So our protocol-owned liquidity basically comes from our VE IDO. We took most of the funds from the IDO and used them as protocol-owned liquidity. So like almost all of the liquidity in our pools, all the pools, come from that. There's like a tiny amount of external liquidity. But yeah, that's where the POL comes from. And your next question, are pool deposits completely shut off at this point, meaning there are no more Lifinity token emissions into the circulating supply from any source? No. So there are team tokens that are unlocking on a monthly basis. So I think that is the only source. Depending on how you interpret it, like you can also interpret like unlocking VE Lifinity as new Lifinity entering the supply. Although like we don't calculate the circulating supply, like we consider all Lifinity locked as VE Lifinity as part of the circulating supply. But technically, like you can't sell VE Lifinity. Of course, you can convert it to X Lifinity, trade X Lifinity for Lifinity, and then sell Lifinity for USDC. But yeah, so there's that too, I guess. But it's not emissions. Yeah, so I think the only new source, the only source of Lifinity that's newly entering the circulating supply is coming from the team's allocation unlocking. Yeah. Next question. Is there ever a time where protocol-owned liquidity is net draining for a certain pool because there's a lot of excess liquidity beyond the target? Hold on, let me try to understand this. Protocol only. I'm not sure I understand. Do you think you can rephrase that question? Just to talk about liquidity while you're writing that up. Like if we ever determine that we have excess liquidity for a pool, we will remove it, because like basically we'd be taking on more risk than we're being compensated for through trading fees. So there's like no point in adding that extra liquidity. So we just remove it. Yeah, that's what I'm asking about. Excess liquidity makes sense. Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's see. And then Roman says, that's right, I've been here in the Solana community since you guys launched, but I've paid more attention since you started killing it on HNT. Nice. Glad to see new people coming from opening newer pools. Yeah, there's definitely a bunch of people in the community who wanted HNT pools around the time that Helium was talking about migrating to Solana. And yeah, now Helium is here, and it's looking like they've had a lot of success, which is great to see. And like I love DePIN overall, so and I wish I was where you can get the Helium mobile plan. $5. That's pretty sick. I wish I could get that, but unfortunately not where I am. Soon, TM. All right. Let's see. Lon Fust asks, "Hi, when are you going to change Lifinity for flares?" Are you talking about the idea that was being thrown around where you can convert your flare to VE Lifinity? Yes. Okay. Yeah, so for context for everyone else, there's a discussion of doing like a one-time thing where flare holders could convert their flares to like their proportional share of VE Lifinity owned by the Flare DAO. Um, so right now, so I threw that idea around in the Inferno channel, and I kind of asked around to see like what kind of demand there was for it. And to be honest, I didn't see much demand for it. Like there was a few people who seemed interested, but even then, like not all of them were like 100% committed. And yeah, it's for us, it's like not really worth going through this whole thing if there's just not much interest in it. Regardless, it would have to go through Flare DAO governance and be accepted there. So there's that as well. And like from my perspective, I think it may only be worth it if Norbert is interested in it. Because he, like sort of like him and the rest of the Flare DAO community is the people that would benefit most from it, because he has such a huge portion of the supply. And it's probably like it would be a nightmare for him to like try to realize profit on that. But he can kind of do that if he wanted to by converting it to VE Lifinity. And if he did that, I think like people basically don't care about there being like this huge giant whale. The Flare DAO community is not concerned about that, right? But still, like for newcomers, they see that, and like some people grow concerned about like what the fuck is this guy holding 1% or 10% of the supply. um yeah, so like it seems like it could be a healthy thing, but yeah, if he's not going to do it, or if like not a ton of pyromaniacs, or in other words those holding 10 or more flares are going to do it, then yeah, it just kind of seems like meh. So like I'm not saying no 100%, but like I kind of tried to pursue it, and then I just saw very little interest, so I kind of stopped pursuing it. So that's where I am right now, personally. But I mean, it's not up to me ultimately. It's up to the Flare DAO. So, people can uh, try to make it happen if they want. All right. Rarman asks, is there a minimum viable version of Liffinity's proactive market maker that could be released to allow the creation of permissionless pools? I understand that a lot of magic is behind the scenes, but I wonder what it would be like to attempt a standard model, without liquidity mining, of course. I'd love to spin up a pool and get even a fraction of the performance of the POL pools. Have users be LPs and take a percent as protocol revenue? Yeah. I've kind of thought about this, and I think it wouldn't work for two main reasons. One is that the pool will likely it'll struggle a lot to be profitable. Because the assumption in this model is that we're not going to make any adjustments or optimizations. It's just we create a pool, it's live, and it trades. I think the minimum viable version, what it would look like, is a V1 pool with a certain level of concentration. And then like it just trades assuming the the Pyth Oracle price, and has a certain rebalancing factor so that it tries to keep the pool at a 50-50 balance. Like that would be the minimum viable version. And yeah, the truth is like we make a ton of optimizations to our pools, and in the absence of those optimizations, I think things would start to fall apart, unfortunately. Um, Part of the issue is the amount of liquidity in pools. So as you probably know, most Lifinity people know that we limit the liquidity in our pools. We don't let people deposit. One of the reasons for that is because the parameters of our pools are optimized according to that amount of liquidity. And if we allow people to deposit and withdraw freely, then yeah, like the parameters will be wrong. They'll constantly be wrong. Like even if we, yeah, like so, yeah, basically what I'm saying is like it needs optimizations, else it's highly unlikely to be profitable. So that's one thing. The other is that it would pit those pools against our other pools that have protocol own liquidity. So they would kind of be competing with each other. But like if they're competing with each other, why would Lifinity even want to create these pools that compete with our current pools? Like if we were lacking in liquidity, then we would just add more liquidity because we have more liquidity to add if we wanted to. So like personally, I love the idea of like permissionlessness and just being able to add pools, and like things like immutability. Like I genuinely like these things, but at the same time, like I have to admit that these things are not a good match for the way Lifinity works. Um, yeah, I'm gonna read the rest of your question, or maybe it was a follow up or something. It's generally frustrating that Raydium is the only good option for permissionless pools, though I do love Raydium. Question is, I thought Orca also had permissionless pools. Am I wrong? Then Rarman says, are you looking at adding protocol owned liquidity for other DePIN projects since you're a fan of the space? Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to add more pools. Um, Not DePIN necessarily, but I mean, definitely open to DePIN. Like, the pools that we look to add are not dependent on uh like the project's fundamentals. It's more about just a token and the token's fundamentals, not tokenomics necessarily. Unless it's like a hyperinflationary coin, then we avoid. But so what we need is one, the token needs decent amount of volume. Two, it needs decent amount of liquidity in the ecosystem. Three, it needs to have an oracle. And four, uh, it probably usually needs to have more volume on centralized exchanges than on decentralized exchanges. So like if there's a token that fits those criteria, then we look to add it. Rawman says, so basically a lot of the magic is off-chain / requires an oracle. Like the optimizations can't be done easily or at all on chain. Yeah, the optimizations, I mean, so yeah, so the optimizations can't be done on chain because basically it's about like data analysis. We look at the historical trades going through our pools as well as through other pools and compare that, and we look at the trades going through centralized exchanges as well. We look to check if like our pool is being exploited in any way, like if it's getting front run. We look to see how close the Pyth Oracle price is to the centralized exchange prices and how much of a difference there is there. And that, I mean, it's part of the reason why we also use our own Oracle to more closely match centralized exchange prices for certain tokens. Stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of it cannot be done on chain. I mean, which kind of makes sense, right? Because like we're relying on an oracle, which is about off-chain stuff. So unless that oracle is perfect, which unfortunately it's not. Oracles are just hard. Pyth is great. I'm not. This is not a dig on Pyth. Pyth is great. It's just um, the price publishers are not perfect. And I don't think that's easy for them either. So but yeah. So yeah, things optimizations do involve like looking at off-chain data, and it can't like all be done on chain, unfortunately. Rawman says Orca requires the token to be whitelisted. Once it is, pools with that token can be created permissionlessly. I see. I did not know that. That's too bad. Yeah, I guess other than Radium. Actually, I don't know, but like if all you want is a constant product pool, I would assume there are some other protocols that let you do that. Although like, very like not used much at all type of protocols. I'm thinking like Cropper or Saros or like some of these very minor dexes probably have that. Uh, Maybe Saber too for stable pairs. I forget if they're permissionless. Rawman says, I think a constant product pool or constant product pools are awesome. I wish I could create one with a custom fee level. Huh. Well, if they don't let you do that with a custom fee level, that would like such a obvious thing to enable. That would be weird if they didn't, but yeah. Um, just curious, what kind of pool you are you looking to create, Rawman? Says Radium is the only protocol that still allows you to create constant product pools at all, as far as I'm aware. Hmm, that's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure like I was gonna say that the code is open source, but I guess that doesn't really matter because you would need to get integrated with Jupyter for anything to matter. So yeah, you can't just like copy the code and launch your own, expected to get volume. And Radium's fee level is stuck at 0.25%. That's too bad. Yeah, I mean, like, especially for more minor tokens, like a 0.25, in my opinion at least, is too low for sure. Like, it should be like 1% or something like that. Because like price is so volatile for minor tokens that it's such a huge risk to provide liquidity that 0.25% for compensation is just not enough to incentivize LPs. Anyways, yeah, that's unfortunate. And also unfortunate that it doesn't really make sense for us to do permissionless pools. That would be cool. Um, but yeah. Rawman says, so there is not even a tiny advantage to be gained simply by using the Pyth Oracle over not doing that. No, I think there is. So, like, let's say you made like the ultimate basic model, which is you always trade at the Pyth price with whatever slippage. More slippage, the larger your order. Um, and there's like not even a rebalancing factor. Like the pool doesn't even try to get back to 50-50, say. That'd be like the ultimate basic model. And I think that would outperform a constant product pool. But again, we're not really incentivized to create that because it would be competing with our own pools, even as they underperform them. um, so yeah, I just don't like see the reason to do that. If that existed, I feel like it would be a value add to the ecosystem. Yeah, I think I agree. Um, but also, yeah, the use would be like pretty limited, I think, because like you could only do it for like non-minor pairs. So like Sol USDC down to, I guess, a bit more minor stuff like Radium USDC or Orca USDC, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, and it's also like I just have to mention again like the part about optimizations because it's like not too difficult to imagine a scenario where these pools just where things go wrong, let's say. So one thing to consider is that if there's no rebalancing mechanism, then the pool can easily get out of balance when all the trades going into it are in one direction. If people are just buying Sol from it, because we're always offering the Oracle price, right? So, you could, so oh yeah, and then so like for example, take this in concert with the fact that sometimes Pyth Oracle prices are systematically biased in one direction. So this is not a true example, but for example, there are cases where something like this will happen, where the SOL price on Pyth is always slightly higher than the centralized exchange price. So say like 0.1% higher or something like that. So it's systematically higher. And when it's like that, then your pool, and if you use that price naively, then it'll gradually get unbalanced / get arbed negatively. And it won't go well for your pool. In the extreme case, the trades just go in one direction until one of the assets is emptied from your pool and you're just left with the other asset. And when that happens, that means you're only providing liquidity on one side, which is not the end of the world, but it means like basically you're just like not doing very good as a market maker. It's like if you placed a LP position on Orca, a concentrated LP position. It's like you're providing liquidity for SOL between $20 and $25, and then the price of SOL goes to like $18. Then now the price is out of your range, which means you have 100% SOL, and so you're like not market making anymore. So like that type of thing, similar thing, can happen in this naive version of Lifinity. Let's see. Let me find where I last read your comment. Oh yeah, so you say, is there not even a tiny advantage to be gained simply by using the Pyth Oracle over not doing that? Like basically Orca plus Pyth. Isn't that much better than just Orca? Yeah, I mean, when you say Orca plus Pyth, it's not obvious what you mean by that. I think there's like a number of interpretations. It depends on like how exactly you implement that, because Orca doesn't update its price, whereas when you say plus Pyth, that implies that it does. And so the question is, how does it update the price? How does it update people's LP positions? It's just like a totally different way of thinking about things. So yeah, you would need to like flesh out the details of how exactly that's done. And you say, makes sense. Maybe blacklist the tokens you want to have as protocol owned liquidity. We could do that, but so like, okay, here's a third factor. Say we make pools, these permissionless pools, but only those that do not compete with our pools. What that practically means is that we're only creating these permissionless pools for tokens that we don't believe we can profitably market make for. So that means we expect these pools to lose money if people deposit, or even if we optimize them. We're saying like, even if we optimize these, we're not confident that we can make money. And yet we're creating these pools and opening them to others. That's like, so we're saying we expect people to lose money in these pools, but we're going to open them, and because I mean, we make money from them, right? Because we just take a fee from their fees, a portion of their fees. We don't care if they, have a ton of impermanent loss. Not our problem. I mean, and that's like the model of other dexes, like basically every other dex, almost every other dex, like Orca, Radium, whatever. It's like the difficult part of intelligently market making is outsourced to the users themselves, and that's why so many LPs lose money on these platforms. I think it's genuinely difficult. And that's why there's professional market makers, and it's a highly competitive space. Anyways, So I mean, like that's fine. It's fine to have that business model, but like for us, it's like it's sort of like contrary to like what we've been putting forth all along, right? Um, yeah, like something like hits me wrong about like putting out these pools where, well, we're not going to put our money in it because like we don't trust these pools, but you guys can go ahead and put your money in it, and we'll just take a fee from it. I don't know. It's kind of what's the word? I'm not finding the word, but like it doesn't feel good. And also like it's kind of different from like Orca or Radium doing that, because for them like that's their entire business model. So that's one thing, but for us, our foundation is like we have protocol owned liquidity, and we uh we work to improve our market making strategy so we can provide liquidity intelligently. But then if we if we at the same time have this other part of our protocol where like we have these permissionless pools where anyone can deposit, and we're not like putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, then yeah, it feels like we have like two faces basically. Anyways, I think you know what I mean. Kind of ranting. So yeah, continuing on with what you wrote. Okay, so it needs to be high volume, and you guys are probably already focused on making pools for most of that stuff anyway. That makes perfect sense. Sounds like you've learned this the hard way. Lol. Yes, I've had painful experiences with concentrated liquidity AMM ranges, even using a tool like Camino to create a tracker. Nothing is perfect except constant product. ... in my heart. Yeah, no, actually, I genuinely love the constant product pool design. Um, I think, you know, in a sense, like the best, some of the best times in DeFi were when there were only constant product pools, like back in the Uniswap V2 days. Like those were the days because that's when liquidity provision was the most egalitarian, basically, because there was no competition between LPs. It wasn't LP versus LP like it is right now. And you know, I will say, like, ultimately, I think that's how it has to end up. Like, there's no avoiding it. But back in the day, everyone would just, you know, provide liquidity in the same way on this constant product pool, this very inefficient curve. Um, and yet, like, everyone's equal. Everyone gets their proportional share of the fees, and it's very simple. You just deposit. There is no strategizing beyond the basic, like when to deposit and withdraw. It's great for liquidity mining. Yeah, those were the days, but no longer. We are moving on to more capital efficient grounds. Yeah. Um, Basically, it's just a professionalization of the liquidity provision space, which again I think is inevitable, and you know also has its positive sides. I think it's better for traders because it means deeper liquidity, right? It's just much worse for retail LPs. Like retail liquidity provision is like it's becoming less and less of a thing because it's so difficult, especially if like you're having to come up with the strategy yourself. It's just hard. I just wrote a thread actually on Camino. They recently released their analytics page where they show how their vault has performed relative to just holding the assets, which is like a really nice feature. I think a lot of people want to know that, and not just the APY from fees, because that doesn't tell the whole story. And yeah, the basic conclusion that I drew from looking at a bunch of those charts was that it works really well for pairs that inherently have little impermanent loss. So stable pairs and semi-stable pairs like Sol, MSOL, and those kinds. Whereas it's much, much harder to profitably make money for volatile pairs. Almost all of them were losing versus just holding, unless there was some kind of incentive. So if the incentive is large enough, then you can beat just holding, and sometimes significantly too, if the incentives are significant, especially. And there was one case where providing liquidity significantly outperformed just holding without any incentives for a volatile pair. That was for MNDE MSOL on Orca specifically. But yeah, that was the only pair that I found that was the case. So yeah, like I mean, it's just like hard. It's really hard to make money providing liquidity. It's a very competitive space. Rarman says any LP position I take is low competition, low leverage, aka wide range or full range, and I'm thankful for the fees as long as I can get them because I know some pros will eventually come make my markets. Yeah, that's basically the way I go about it too. Like, um, I almost never provide liquidity these days. The singular recent example was for BLZE. I got a airdrop and I sold half of it like pretty quickly, paired it with BSOL, and just provided full range liquidity on Orca. And that pool had 1% fees, which is high, which is good because BLZ was like in price discovery, still is probably. And like that worked pretty good for a while. Gradually, liquidity increased, and there was like more and more people putting like highly concentrated positions, so that my full range just gets less and less fees, as well as like the liquidity mining rewards of BLZE. So at some point, I was like, meh, probably not worth it anymore, and withdrew the LP position. Yeah, like before that, I can't even tell you the last time I provided liquidity, I think. Um, I mean, Lifinity indirectly, but yeah, other than that, like, or I have to choose something manually. Can't think of when the last time was before that. Rawman says, great work on the protocol. It's criminal that there are only 3 of us in here. Keep it up. We'll be following. Thanks, man. Nice to sort of meet you. And thanks for all your questions, too. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have any questions? Lord Lube, Honey Badger, OGs. And do we have anyone on Twitter? JCX04, what's up? Oh. see. Oh, someone typing in the AMA chat. Lord Lube. Quiet OGs. Hope you're doing well, Durden. Always nice to hear your talks. Thank you, sir. And it's good to have you in the audience. Honey Badger says, cheers, Durden. I'm good. Hopefully get the volume straight back next month. Circulating Lifinity down to 9% is also very good to see. Yeah, that is like really cool to see. I mean, it's kind of crazy that like such a high percentage of the circulating supply is locked. JCX04 says no questions. Thanks for the AMA. Yeah, I'm actually like, so one of the things I've been thinking about is how to spread the Lifinity tokenomics model. And the reason I think that would be good is not just, or yeah, so if like other protocols adopt it, when they announce it, they're probably going to mention us, right? But then also like all the people who learn through these other protocols adopting that type of tokenomics will indirectly learn how Lifinity works. Or even if they later encounter Lifinity, they'll already be primed and they'll have an understanding of like how this token system works. And like I think it's just a good token system. Like VE token, X token. So I'm trying to get Realms, the governance protocol on Solana, to adopt this token model, or basically like to enable it, so that projects can like easily opt in to this model. Yeah, which would be pretty dope. And yeah, like one of the benefits of this model is that like, especially if you pair it with like a VE IDO, even though I think there's other ways to do it post token launch as well. But if you like do a launch that like assumes a token locking event where people can choose to lock their tokens and get some kind of benefit for that, then like a ton of the supply gets locked. And if you tie benefits to locking your tokens like we do, then like a ton of the supply is going to get locked. Anyways, yeah, so I'm trying to write this mega thread, but it may take forever. And it may have no effect. But we'll see. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, listening to my ramblings. Thanks for the question, as always. Appreciate it. Have a good one. I'll see you guys around. Peace.